life, it didn't just change, it fell apart. Not in one catastrophic moment, like they show in movies. No, it was a slow, agonizing process. Day by day, week by week, it frayed at the seams like old fabric. Until at some point, I realized it had completely disintegrated. The loss was so sudden, so utterly unbearable. It was as if not just a part of me, but almost my entire soul had been ripped out, leaving a gaping, bleeding wound that just wouldn't heal, and every breath I took resonated with it. I simply couldn't stay in the city. Physically couldn't. Everything there, absolutely everything, reminded me of her. Every street, every intersection where we once walked, holding hands. Every house we passed by, laughing at trifles. Every scent, the scent of blooming lilac, the scent of wet asphalt after rain, the scent of coffee from a small cozy cafe. All of it hit me squarely, causing such physical pain that it became difficult to breathe. It was torture, just to be there. My mind, already tormented by grief, began to buckle under the pressure. I saw her face in the crowd, heard her laughter in the rush of cars, felt her touch in the gentle summer breeze, and each time, it was a new dagger twist. Something had to change, urgently, radically, to flee, to disappear, to hide from myself, from memories, from everything. The day before I left, as I was packing the last of my belongings into the car, on an old, almost derelict street that led out of the city, I caught a glimpse of her. A girl, about 6 or 7, stood by a crumbling fence, holding a faded old teddy bear. A soft, barely perceptible glow seemed to emanate from her, so pure and warm that I involuntarily squinted. Her sun-colored hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she looked at me with large, curious eyes. I didn't give it much thought then. Just a random child's figure against the backdrop of a dreary urban landscape. Too consumed by my pain, I merely nodded at her and hurried on, not even wondering what she was doing alone in such a place. It was just a fleeting moment, a strange but insignificant detail in the overall picture of my despair. Like a brief dream that flashed by amidst my desperate urge to escape. That day, I thought only of fleeing, of how to leave these walls, these streets, suffocating with her memories, and find a place where my grief could just die. I found this house by chance. I was just scrolling through online ads in a fit of desperation, searching for something as far as possible from everything I knew. And I stumbled upon it. It stood amidst vast fields with a dense, dark forest visible on the horizon, appearing like a black ink stain against the twilight sky. The price was ludicrously low, almost free, as if someone desperately wanted to get rid of it. It was located not even in a village in the usual sense, but rather in what was left of one, a remote, almost entirely abandoned hamlet. Just a couple of inhabited houses, scattered far apart. The roads were bad, communication was almost non-existent. Perfect, complete isolation, silence, an opportunity to be alone with my grief, to process it, to cocoon myself in my pain. I thought it would help. Naive. I was so terribly, catastrophically wrong. This place doesn't heal. It doesn't offer peace. It attracts. It attracts those who are broken, those who carry a heavy burden. My grief was precisely such a burden, one that, as it turned out, perfectly suited this place. The journey to the village proved to be a real ordeal. City streets gave way to dusty country lanes, asphalt to gravel, then to mud. Mobile phone reception gradually vanished, and soon the screen simply displayed no signal. The farther I drove, the more my heart constricted, not from fear, but from the realization that I was leaving behind not just the city, but everything that connected me to my familiar life, as if tearing off a piece of my own flesh. For the last few kilometers, the car barely crawled, sputtering, and at the entrance to the village, right by a dilapidated sign with sorrowful, barely visible on it, it stalled. Completely. I cranked the starter, trying to revive the engine, but it only coughed dully and remained silent. It was as if the very ground refused my progress. I got out, kicked a tire in frustration, but soon resigned myself. I'd fix it tomorrow. For now, the most important thing was to just get inside and lose myself in the silence this corner of the earth promised. The house looked exactly how I felt. Weary, broken. It stood askew, as if groaning under the weight of years and utter neglect. Peeling faded paint hung in shreds. Once probably white, now grey, as if covered in millennia of dust. The old rotting window frames looked like empty dark eye sockets on a decrepit face, watching me. The yard was overgrown with weeds and thorny bushes taller than a man, seemingly hiding something in their shadows. And the air around the house was several degrees colder than elsewhere. Inside, there was a stale smell, a mix of dampness, dust, and something else, something old and dead that made my stomach clench, like a crypt. But I didn't care, absolutely. The main thing was silence. No one around, no one would bother me, no one would ask questions, wouldn't sympathize, wouldn't remind me. I brought my belongings in, a meager collection of possessions I'd managed to gather. I unpacked them haphazardly, trying to create a semblance of normal life, an ordinariness to cling to. But even these simple actions felt arduous. Stale air. The house had been abandoned for years. I worked almost non-stop, trying to exhaust myself into oblivion, just to fall asleep and not think about the void that had settled within me. When the sun set, a darkness descended that I had never seen in the city, impenetrable, consuming, without a single star, and the silence. It wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a ringing, oppressive silence that made me want not just to scream, but to bang my head against the wall, just to hear something, anything, to break this suffocating abyss. I tried to convince myself. I'm probably just used to the endless background noise of the city. This is normal. Rural silence is like this. Every step on the creaking floorboards sounded unnaturally loud, echoing in the empty rooms. The distant, monotonous drip of water from a faulty kitchen faucet echoed with a chilling rhythm. And the groan of the old wood in the house walls seemed alive, as if the house itself was trying to sigh. I worked almost non-stop, trying to exhaust myself into oblivion, just to fall asleep and not think about the void that had settled within me. When the sun set, a darkness descended that I had never seen in the city, impenetrable, consuming, without a single star, and the silence. It wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a ringing, oppressive silence that made me want not just to scream, but to bang my head against the wall. Just to hear something, anything, to break this suffocating abyss. I tried to convince myself I'm probably just used to the endless background noise of the city. This is normal. Rural silence is like this. Every step on the creaking floorboards sounded unnaturally loud, echoing in the empty rooms. The distant, monotonous drip of water from a faulty kitchen faucet echoed with a chilling rhythm. And the groan of the old wood in the house walls seemed alive, as if the house itself was trying to sigh. I lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned, listening to every sound that, in essence, wasn't there. Then, through the monotonous drip of water in the kitchen, I heard it, a faint, ragged gasp, as if someone, very old and tired, stood right next to my bed, their breath cold as ice. I froze. My heart hammered in my throat. This was not the wind, not the creak of wood. This was the sound. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to shake off the apparition. But then this oppressive silence began to break. First with barely audible sounds. Creaks as if the house itself was alive and settling under the weight of time. Rustles behind the walls. I thought, mice probably. Old house, what did you expect? But my voice trembled. Or the wind was whistling through cracks, making the shutters creak. I attributed everything to the old house, to the wind, or to my nerves. Grief, loneliness, the constant stress of change and loss. All of it could cause auditory hallucinations, right? I tried to convince myself that everything was explainable, but deep down, the first seed of unease had already sprouted, growing into a clammy fear. Around midnight, as exhaustion finally claimed me, I was startled awake by a sharp but quiet knock at the window overlooking the backyard. 3 short, distinct taps. I sprang up, rushed to the window, but beyond it was only impenetrable darkness, and I saw only my distorted reflection in the black glass. I spent the rest of the night pressed against the wall, feeling the cold emanating from the floor, not daring to close my eyes. Morning brought a brief respite. The sunlight felt like salvation, driving away the shadows from the corners, but not from my soul. I felt broken, my head pounding from lack of sleep, my muscles aching from tension. But I decided I had to get out of the house and try to find help with the car, and perhaps even buy some food. After all, I couldn't simply starve. The village, which turned out to be more like scattered, solitary houses across vast expanses, showed only a few signs of life. No shops, no signs of civilization, just old, dilapidated barns and empty, overgrown gardens. No signs, no proper roads, just directions leading nowhere. I headed towards the only smoke I'd seen yesterday, hoping to find more welcoming people there. Or at least people who wouldn't look at me that way. The first house was unassuming, wooden, with a crooked gate and garden beds overgrown with weeds, as if untouched for years. A wreath of dried herbs hung beneath the window, smelling of something bitter and ancient. I approached the door and knocked. The door opened just an inch, and a wrinkled, weary face of an elderly woman appeared in the crack. Her gaze was heavy, and deep lines around her mouth suggested years of constant tension. "Excuse me," I began, trying to speak as politely as possible, though my voice trembled. "My car stalled at the village entrance. Do you know anyone who works with mechanics around here? Or perhaps you could tell me where the nearest store is. I just need help. I'll even pay." The woman peered at me, her eyes dark and unreadable, as if she saw something hidden from me, something I had brought with me. "No one here deals with that," she croaked, her voice dry as autumn leaves, and she didn't open the door wider, blocking the entrance with her thin body. "A store? You won't reach the city on foot. Go your own way, stranger. You're not welcome here." She slammed the door shut before I could utter another word, and I heard the click of the lock and the slide of a bolt. Her words were sharp, but what struck me most was her gaze. Not so much hostile, but filled with a kind of deep, ancient weariness and unwillingness. It was as if she knew I had brought something alien, dangerous. And it wasn't just in my belongings. I tried knocking on a couple more houses that seemed inhabited, but everywhere I was met either with complete silence, curtained windows, and locked doors, or with quick, curt answers full of aversion. At one house, the door cracked open, and a man, lurking in the shadows, simply mumbled, "Don't poke where you're not wanted. Don't infect others with your grief. There are enough troubles here already." Then the door slammed shut with such force that plaster fell from the door frame. People turned away, slammed doors, as if I carried a plague. No one would meet my gaze for more than a second. They were all afraid, or hiding something. It was as if the entire village was one large lurking entity, watching me. Returning to the house, I felt even more isolated. My attempt to fix the car myself failed. I'm no mechanic, and I had no suitable tools. I couldn't even walk to the nearest town. Despair consumed me. It was as if I was trapped, and not just because of the broken car. A premonition of something inevitable hung heavy in the air. It was my only constant companion, throbbing in my temples and constricting my chest. I sat for hours, days on end, sifting through her things. Her scarves, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. Her books with notes in the margins. Her jewelry. I looked at photos, remembering every moment. I wept, inconsolably. And it seemed the stronger my sorrow, the deeper I plunged into those painful, searing memories, the clearer and closer the sounds became. Low, indistinct sounds, like a distant echo or a whisper. Now it was quiet steps. At night, slow measured steps, as if someone was strolling unhurriedly. Somewhere nearby. In the corridor behind the closed door. Upstairs. In the attic. And then there was this terrible, oppressive feeling that someone was watching me. Constantly. From the dark openings of the windows. From the corners of rooms where the light didn't reach. From behind my back, when I sat staring into the void. I started sleeping with the lights on, which didn't ward off the shadows that seemed alive. I checked the locks 10 times each evening, my clammy hands sliding over the cold metal. I listened to every rustle, which now seemed more voluminous, and the steps on the wooden floor, clearer. I heard them distinctly, as if someone was walking right above my head, then stopping, as if listening to my breathing. I would jump up, turn on every light I could, but there was nothing around. Only silence, which again became oppressive, but now with a new, ominous undertone. This time, besides the steps, I began to hear something else, a faint but distinct whisper, as if thousands of voices were trying to say something, but the words crumbled into dust before reaching my ears. It seemed to come from the walls, from the floor, from the very wood of the house so old that it seemed to remember everything. It sounded like a groan, but not physical, rather something much deeper, as if the house itself was trying to warn me, or perhaps curse me. I rushed through the rooms, my heart pounding in my chest, my sweaty palms sliding along the walls, searching for the source of these sounds, but finding only cold, cracked plaster. At one point, standing in the middle of the living room, I heard one of the voices distinctly pronounce my name. It was exactly like hers, but there was no warmth in it, only an unfathomable emptiness that chilled my blood and made the hairs on my arms stand on end. This sound was so real that I cowered, trying to escape. But where? I collapsed to the floor, covering my ears with my hands, trying to stifle this nightmare. But the voice, though it had faded, continued to echo inside my head. In the morning, after a sleepless night, when the nightmarish voices still seemed to ring in my ears, despair overwhelmed me. My head was splitting, dark circles hung under my eyes, and my entire body ached from exhaustion and constant tension. I could barely think straight, but I knew. I had to understand what was happening here. I tried to distract myself, to occupy myself with something, to get myself together, to clean the house, to finally throw out those empty wine bottles that had accumulated during my first weeks here, when I was simply trying to drown out the pain. And so, I decided to clean the attic. Before this, I had avoided it. It seemed the darkest place in the house. The air there was especially heavy and permeated with the smell of mold, mixed with something sickly sweet and decaying. On some walls, I noticed growing patches of black mold, as if the house itself was rotting from within. And these patches, strangely, seemed to form patterns, barely discernible in the dim light. I climbed the old creaking wooden stairs. Each step resonated with a dull groan in the darkness, and I felt dust falling from above. My hands trembled, gripping the railing, and each step kicked up clouds of dust that settled on my face, getting into my lungs, causing me to cough. There, on an old wooden chest covered with a thick layer of dust, I saw her belongings, neatly, incredibly neatly folded. Her favorite blue sweater, the very jeans that suited her so well. They were folded exactly as she used to fold them every morning, preparing for work or simply laying out clothes for the next day. Next to them lay a scarf on which I clearly detected the scent of her perfume. Exactly the same as it had been in the city, but with a faint hint of decay. My heart clenched into an icy knot of terror. I couldn't have done this. I hadn't been in that attic for almost a year. It had been filled with junk and cobwebs. Who? How? When? I trembled so violently that I could barely stand. My breath caught in my throat. This was not a hallucination, not a trick of an imagination tormented by grief. This was real. The things were here. Someone had folded them. At that moment, rational explanations ceased. The convictions that it was just the wind or my nerves crumbled to dust. I became genuinely terrified. A primal, clammy fear filled me. I realized that there was something, or someone, in this house. Something that was deliberately doing these things to torment me. In a frantic search, I began tossing old junk aside, like a madman, looking for anything that could explain this horror. Old books, broken furniture, dusty rags. Everything flew aside, raising clouds of dust. Beneath a pile of old blankets and broken furniture, I stumbled upon another chest, this one secured with a rusty lock that wouldn't yield. Tearing it open with a crowbar I found in the shed, I discovered an old, yellowed, battered journal of the previous homeowner. Its pages were thin, almost transparent, and the ink had faded, but the entries were clear, written in a nervous, trembling hand. Her writings were confused, fragmented, but they emanated the same fear that now settled within me. She wrote of strange things in the house, of it, of someone who came at night, stood by the windows watching. I saw scans of handwritten notes, some words underlined or circled in red, as if with blood. It, at night, watches. I'm afraid here comes a kai. Its eyes, her voice, the oak, blood. On one page, there was an angular, ugly symbol, resembling an inverted cross crossed with writhing lines. Beneath it was written, "The Griever, blood and tears, it wants her." She wrote of an ancient curse, of an old gnarled oak tree on the outskirts of the village, a place connected to something very ancient and terrifying, the source of all this evil, of something here that could take the form of people, someone you loved and lost, of disappearances, people who simply vanished from the village, as if they had never existed. Their grief, presumably, causing their disappearance. Feeding this entity, I stepped out of the house to catch my breath, and my gaze fell upon something incredible. Right by the weed-choked entrance, against the backdrop of thickening fog, which seemed unnaturally dense for daytime and moved as if alive, stood the very same girl with the sun-colored hair whom I had seen near the city. She held her old teddy bear and looked at me with a soft but shy smile. A gentle, barely perceptible glow still emanated from her, like a small sun amidst the grey gloom that permeated everything around. I didn't recognize her, or rather, my mind was so clouded by fear and fatigue that I didn't connect these two encounters. "Hello," I mumbled, pulling a forgotten candy from my pocket that I'd carried with me since the city. Perhaps it was my only act of normalcy in days, and I was surprised myself that I had it. The girl reached for the treat, her eyes widening with delight. "Thank you," she whispered in a clear, melodious voice that seemed to dispel the fog around us, like a tiny musical bell. She laughed joyfully, her laughter pure and carefree, and suddenly bolted towards the forest, towards that same ancient oak described in the journal. Before I could blink, she dissolved into the mist as if she had never been there, leaving behind only a faint shimmer. I stood puzzled, but deep down I felt a fleeting, yet pleasant warmth that quickly faded as I returned to the house, but left behind a faint, barely perceptible scent of freshness and something akin to hope. Despite the sleepless night and the strange encounter, I felt driven. The journal in my hand seemed like more than just old notes. It was a map to a solution, a last chance. My legs felt like cotton, and every movement ached, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't remain ignorant any longer. I couldn't sleep anymore. I knocked on the elderly neighbor's door, but this time I was met with silence. I knocked again, louder. I pounded on the door until my knuckles ached, but no one opened. Then I heard a faint, pitiful moan from inside. The door creaked, and she appeared on the threshold, even more haggard than yesterday. Her eyes were wild with panic. and her hands trembled, as if she had endured something terrible. "What happened?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. I read the journal. It talks about a curse, about something that takes forms, about disappearances. Do you know something? What's happening here? Did you see anything last night?" The woman nervously scanned her surroundings, her gaze darting across the deserted street, the deep shadows cast by the trees, and then at my face. She seemed to see something invisible to me. "Quiet. Don't speak so loudly. It hears. It was here. Last night, it called again for you," she hissed, covering her mouth with a trembling hand as if trying to stifle a scream. "You must leave before it's too late. You attracted it. Your grief. It's like a beacon for it. It smells sorrow, it smells pain. And it won't rest until it takes you whole. It wants to take you. It wants to consume your despair, your soul. You cannot defeat it by force. But how? What kind of entity is it? And how do I get rid of it? What should I do?" I desperately asked, trying to grasp any lifeline. She pursed her lips, her gaze becoming pained, filled with memories of long-past horrors of those who couldn't escape. "It's the Griever. It's ancient, as old as this land, older than the trees, older than the mountains. It lives in the shadows, feeding on despair, on shattered hopes, on broken hearts. It's invisible until it takes form. The form of the dearest person you had, whom you lost. It attaches itself to your memories, to your sorrow. It is your pain, made alive, made your tormentor." She pointed a trembling finger at my house, at my hands, which still clutched the journal. "And to let go, for it to let go. You must let go yourself, of what binds you here, of what it devours. All material evidence of your grief, everything that hurts, everything that connects you. That is its food. Destroy the food, and it will weaken. Grief should not be an anchor. It will only vanish when you free yourself from it." Her voice became a barely audible whisper, and then she abruptly recoiled, casting one last, terrified look at me. "It sees. It's close. Run," she gasped. And the door slammed shut with a dull thud, leaving me in complete bewilderment and terror. I looked at my house, then at the darkening forest where that ancient oak, mentioned in the journal, once stood. Its gnarled, twisted branches seemed to reach out to me, writhing in the twilight air like the fingers of a corpse. Perhaps there I could find something else, some more clues, before night fully descended. But I had a gnawing feeling that time was running out. Every rustle behind me made me jump, and I felt as if invisible eyes were watching me from every dark corner. My thoughts raced, trying to comprehend the full horror that had befallen me, and to find a way out of this nightmare trap. I knew. I felt with every cell of my body. I knew that this evening would be different, decisive. The air in the house became heavy, sticky, as if before a storm, and charged with static electricity. It felt like every object in the room was vibrating with tension, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. The sounds from outside, which had tormented me every night, ceased. A dead, unnatural silence descended, ringing in my ears, drowning out my own heartbeat. But inside the house, hell began. It came. Or she, or it was here. In the house, right in the house, not through the door I had barricaded, not through the window. It simply appeared, materialized from the thickest, blackest darkness in the corner of the room. As if darkness itself had come alive and taken form. Slowly but inevitably, like solidifying lava. distorted, unnatural. It felt like every object in the room was vibrating with tension, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. The sounds from outside, which had tormented me every night, ceased. A dead, unnatural silence descended, ringing in my ears, drowning out my own heartbeat. But inside the house, hell began. It came. Or she, or it. It was here. In the house, right in the house. Not through the door I had barricaded, not through the window. It simply appeared, materialized from the thickest, blackest darkness in the corner of the room, as if darkness itself had come alive and taken form. Slowly but inevitably, like solidifying lava. Distorted, unnatural. Suddenly, 3 distinct knocks echoed on the nearest window facing the street, and the sound was so loud it felt as if the glass should have shattered. My heart rate quickened, thudding in my ears, and I felt cold sweat trickle down my back. The knock at the window. 3 times. As if someone was politely, but persistently, asking to be let in. And then I heard its voice. A familiar voice. Her voice. A voice I hadn't heard in so long, but had longed to hear again every night. It called my name, as if caressing my ear, like a tender promise. It pleaded to be let in. Open the door. My love, I'm back. Don't leave me alone. I'm so cold. The voice sounded exactly like hers. Every intonation, every note. But there was something about it. Wrong. Cold. Empty. Too perfect. Like a mechanical replica. And I see its face in the darkness beyond the glass. And it slowly approaches. And I realize something is wrong with it. The eyes. Empty, black abysses, devoid of light or life. Just bottomless blackness pulling me in. The mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile that revealed too many teeth, sharp as needles, like a predator's. This was not her. This was a parasite, something that had donned her face. Her voice, like a mask, to deceive, to lure, to devour me. A harsh, terrible scraping began on the glass, as if claws were dragging across it, trying to shatter it. And the sound was so piercing, it seemed to penetrate my very bones. The house became a trap. I tried to call, to cry for help. No mobile signal. Zero. To the nearest town, dozens of kilometers over bad roads. And my car was dead. I was trapped. I barricaded the doors and windows with everything I could find. Furniture, planks, books. My hands trembled, and sweat streamed into my eyes. But I kept pushing and moving until I collapsed from exhaustion. I tried one more time to start the car, cranking the starter until the battery died completely. A dull click, and then utter silence. I was completely cut off from the world, alone with this horror, but it didn't help. Every night they came. They stood by the door. They watched through the peephole, or simply stood under the windows, in the darkness, quietly whispering my name or simply making sounds that curdled my blood, sounds that belonged to nothing living. Was it him? That strange homeless man from the city I'd briefly seen on my first day when I drove in? His face had seemed odd then. Or was it this entity in his guise? Or were there many of them? This time, I saw them not just outside. The shadows in the corners of the room began to coalesce, taking shape. I saw shimmering, distorted faces that appeared and vanished, like bubbles on the surface of water, their eyes glowing with a malevolent, hungry light. They were everywhere, their presence oppressive. I began to see things constantly, not just here, shadows in the corners that grew too dense, too dark, and sometimes seemed to move, like living creatures slithering along the walls, following me, figures in the darkness that loomed at the periphery of my vision, and when I turned sharply, vanished, as if woven from smoke. I constantly looked over my shoulder, flinching at every rustle, every sound, every change in the shadows. I doubted myself. Was it just me? Had my grief shattered my mind, and now I only saw what this place wanted me to see? Grief and loneliness were driving me insane. I felt myself, slowly, inexorably, losing my mind from this endless fear, paranoia, and oppressive solitude. My limbs felt numb. My temples pounded with blood, and my lungs, it seemed, refused to breathe, as if something was squeezing my chest with an invisible grip. Panic, pure, primal terror, so all-consuming that my mind shut down. Thoughts vanished. Only one instinct remained. Run. Get out of here. Away from this nightmare. I tried to run. I dashed to the door I had barricaded, then to the window. But the house, it had changed. It had become alive. It was no longer my home. It was a trap. The corridors I had walked hundreds of times became endless labyrinths. The walls grew, the ceiling lowered, and I suffocated in this confined space. Doors that a second ago led to another room now opened into a solid brick wall or a viscous, black, pulsating void that seemed to drag me in, threatening to swallow me whole. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting, exuding the smell of decay and rot. And on the black mold, I saw veins pulsing, the ceiling lowered, threatening to crush me, and I thrashed in this living, distorted nightmare, feeling the increasing cold. It was coming for me, its claws scraping on the floor. Heavy footsteps, the groans of old timbers, and a distorted, hissing whisper blended into a nightmarish symphony of my agony. I heard its breath behind me, felt its icy cold that penetrated my skin, freezing my blood. At that moment, when the terror reached its absolute peak, when it seemed there was no escape, and I was about to be overtaken, words flashed in my mind. The old woman's words, and the entries in the former owner's journal. That strange, terrifying phrase, "The harder you hold on to what's gone, the harder it is to let go. What burns the heart, that's the path to the flame." The meaning struck me like lightning, a brilliant flash amidst the madness. It was as if ice water had been poured over me, shocking me out of paralyzing fear. The curse, the entity, they were bound to my sorrow, to my pain, to the things that held me to this past, to my inability, my unwillingness to let go. This was its anchor, its food, its power. It fed on my grief, my sorrow, my memory of her. It was a symbiont, a monstrous parasite living off my soul. I stumbled and fell to the floor, gasping for breath from fear and exhaustion. But with a new, sudden resolve, my gaze fixed on something nearby. The box with her belongings, old photos, letters I had brought with me. My last anchor to my old life. The entity's sounds were very close. It was directly behind me now. Heavy, ragged breathing brushed against the back of my neck. Claws scraped on the wood. There it was, right behind me, its shadow already looming over me. Its distorted voice. Her voice whispered directly into my ear. "You are mine, always mine. Your pain is my life. You can't let me go. I'm part of you." A realization pierced me. The only way, horrible, painful, but the only way, I had to let go. Not just in thought. Physically. Burn everything that tied me to her. Everything that was a material embodiment of my pain and my attachment. The entity was very close. I felt its icy breath on the back of my neck. Its claws scraped on the floor, approaching with every passing moment. Its distorted voice shrieked my name. A voice that was both hers and not hers. "You promised. You're mine. You don't dare. You're mine," it hissed, and I felt its icy touch burn my neck like red-hot iron. "I promised you nothing, creature. Never." My hands wouldn't obey. They trembled so violently I could barely hold the lighter. But I had to. Now, in this instant, or never. I flicked the old gasoline lighter. Several failed attempts. Clicks of the wheel, but no spark. My fingers were numb with cold and terror. The entity's sounds intensified. It was right there, its breathing audible, and a stench reminiscent of a crypt filled the room, choking me. At this critical moment, when panic threatened to consume me entirely and my strength was waning, I caught a glimpse of light in my peripheral vision. Through the gloom, right in an opening that had been a wall a second ago, now glowing with a soft, warm luminescence, a familiar, small figure appeared. It was the same girl with the sun-colored hair whom I had seen on the road. And before that, in the city, she stood there, radiating such a calm, warm glow that for a moment the terror receded, as if driven away by an invisible force. Her eyes, full of bottomless wisdom and empathy, looked directly into mine, and I felt her support. She didn't utter a word, but gently, yet persistently, nodded towards my trembling hands and the crumpled lighter, then pointed to the box of belongings where her letters, her photos, her favorite locket lay, all the material symbols of my pain. Her lips silently whispered, but the words resonated clearly and distinctly in my mind. "What you hold, it should not be here. Let go. Let the flame cleanse. This is its end. Be free." This was not a ghostly vision. It was a solid, almost tangible reality that filled me with strength, banishing the paralysis and bringing clarity. I understood. I flicked the lighter, this time with firmness and resolve. A spark, a flame, onward, addressed not to the creature behind me, but to the one I had lost, with a quiet new pain that, however, no longer burned so unbearably, but felt like a deep, old scar. Forgive me. The fire slowly but surely engulfed the things on the floor. The flames grew, becoming brighter, casting wild shadows on the walls, dancing in this nightmare. The crackling of burning things grew louder, more furious, raising the smell of burning fabric, wood, and something acrid, otherworldly, that seemed to be burning out of existence. The entities furious, piercing, inhuman screams erupted from behind the nearest wall or doorway. The sound filled with agony and despair, unlike anything I had ever heard. Dull thuds against the door, as if it was trying to break through, but its strength waned with each passing second, its grip weakening. The creature's scream. It wasn't just a sound. It was a cry of pure, inhuman rage, an absolute helplessness, agony from hunger, from its food disappearing. It couldn't enter. It couldn't reach me. Not now. I was letting go. Not just in thought, in reality. Every burning photograph, every letter, every piece of clothing. This was a broken attachment. I was burning its food, its anchor, its power over me. I got out. I don't know how. Instinct for self-preservation, perhaps. Or the strength the girl had given me. Or perhaps it simply released me at that moment as its power waned, and it began to die. The house was ablaze. Flames burst from the window frames, tongues of fire engulfing the roof like a predator devouring its prey. A column of smoke rose towards the black, starless sky, carrying away the remnants of the nightmare, like a black hole in the heavens. My house, the house of my grief, burned to the ground. Memory burned, possessions, recollections. Everything that held me in this place, in this pain. The pain. It didn't completely disappear. That's impossible. A loss of this magnitude doesn't pass without a trace. But it changed. The fire cleansed it, made it cold, sharp, but not so oppressive, not so all-consuming, not the kind that binds you to death. And the entity, I saw it one last time. It stood some distance from the burning house, a silhouette writhing in the smoke, like a ghost. Pitiable, distorted, stripped of its power. Its anchor had burned, and its existence was now merely a shadow. Its screams turned into a whistle, then a hiss, and finally into a silent dissolution, like smoke carried away by the wind. It simply disintegrated into the smoke, into the haze of the fire. As if woven from it, it vanished with it, leaving behind only a stench and emptiness in the air. I found my car. The keys, which I thought lost, were in my pocket, as if they had been waiting for this moment. It started on the first try. The engine rumbled, as if it too had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to let go, for me to find freedom. I drove away, without looking back. Even when the glow of the fire disappeared behind the trees, I didn't stop. Continuing to drive down the dirt road, I knew I would never return. This village, it remained there, cursed with its secrets, with the old oak, under which perhaps the Griever now slept, exhausted, awaiting a new misfortune, with all that horror that feeds on human pain. And I survived. I broke free, but I changed. Something inside me broke forever. The nightmares remained. But now, not about her, but about it. About that distorted face. About those empty eyes. A constant, oppressive feeling remained that I'm being watched. From crowds of strangers, from the windows of houses I pass by, from the dark corners of rooms, that a part of it remained with me, in my soul, like a scar, like a warning, or that the threat has not yet passed, that it is just waiting for new grief, new weakness, mine or someone else's, to come again, to find a new victim for its hunger. And I knew that I could never truly forget this house, nor what lived within it. But I was free, free from that old, all-consuming pain. And now, perhaps, I could begin to live anew, with a new scar on my soul, but without chains.